Hey, what's up, people? Welcome to my review and in depth analysis of 5 Days of Sith, written by Brian Wood and drawn by Facundo Percio. And I just want to say, I was really blown away by this story. I thought it was really good, even though it was short. So, technically, this is only 2 issues of the comic book series Star Wars that was released by Dark Horse from 2013 to 2014. And it's also part of the collected volume, and that would be volume 4, called A Shattered Hope. Now, A Shattered Hope is not like the previous volumes where they collected basically a 6 issue story arc. A Shattered Hope has 3 stories in the collection, but I like this one so much that I decided just to review 5 Days of Sith because I really thought this was an outstanding story, and mostly because it centers around my favorite Star Wars character, Darth Vader. And I love how this story is told through the eyes of an Imperial officer, and it really conveys to the reader the terror that Darth Vader basically is able to generate within the narrator, right? And I thought that was outstanding, and it really gets very psychological, and there's a lot of suspense, and also like you just really get a great sense at the type of terror that Darth Vader is able to elicit in his underlings, right? And subordinates. And I really love this story, and I also love the fact that it really ties in well to the original trilogy, and it also contributes to some explanations in regards to some of the things that happen in the original trilogy, and it gives little subtle backstories to details that I don't think people really thought too much about them. But when I read this story, I was really like, wow, I really like that. And I really thought Brian Wood did an excellent job with the writing. I see no problem with this series. I know there's some people out there that didn't like it, but I can't for the life of me figure out why. I keep waiting for like a bad story arc, right? I keep waiting for something not good to happen as far as like me coming across like a bad issue or a bad story, but I haven't come across one yet. So far, I've really loved this series, and yeah, the artwork has kind of changed hands from one artist to another for the most part, but for this specific issue, Facundo does an outstanding job. I think his artwork is outstanding and the coloring is gorgeous. This is a beautiful comic and I highly recommend it. So let's get started with this in-depth analysis and review of 5 Days of Sith. So you have to keep in mind the events that just happened in the prior volume, which was called Rebel Girl. Long story short, there was a rebel spy that was able to make his way high in the Imperial ranks, right? And this individual was known as Colonel Bircher. And Colonel Bircher actually took over command of Darth Vader's ship as a punishment for Darth Vader due to his failure in regards to the first Death Star, right? So, long story short, this Colonel Bircher turned out to be a rebel spy who's related to Mon Mothma. Mon Mothma is actually his aunt, and Vader is furious, right? He's furious at just the whole predicament. He's furious that he was demoted and that this spy took over his ship. He's furious that the Emperor couldn't foresee this and that he even allowed this to even happen. Well, not allowed it to happen, but that it went unnoticed on his watch that Colonel Bircher was able to infiltrate the Empire, right? And rise up in the ranks. And not only that, but Vader he has a former agent, or he had a former agent known as Barasea, Barasea, whatever. I'm not good with these Star Wars names sometimes. So this individual is on the run from Vader. She's terrified of Vader. And the reason why she's on the run is because she made Vader aware of Luke Skywalker, who basically infiltrated one of Vader's Star Destroyer, which at the time was under the command of Colonel Bircher, and she failed at capturing him, right? So Luke was on the ship, on the Star Destroyer, and he was able to escape. And as a result of failing to capture Luke, she went AWOL, right? She's on the run. Now, this is literally probably the only thing I didn't like about this issue or this story, 5 Days of Sith. It was that we bring up this Bira character, but she never appears in the comic, right? So I'm just going to let you know right now. They talk about her at the very beginning, basically just a reminder of what happened to her in Rebel Girl. And then at the very end of this story, they say, oh yeah, she was found dead somewhere. And that's literally it, right? And I was just kind of, I could care less because I didn't really care too much about the character. But, Jesus, you couldn't give us 2 pages or something where you just show us what happened to her. They don't explain how she got killed, why she got killed, what she was doing. They just say like, oh, she was found on some backwater planet dead. They don't say how she died, why she died, who killed her, what she was doing, nothing. So it just kind of felt pointless, and I don't know. Maybe they did that because they were running out of steam. I believe that this series came out during the transition to Disney, right? So maybe they were like, hey, Dark Horse, wrap this up because moving forward, starting next month, next year, whatever, Marvel's taking over. Disney's taking over. Maybe that's what happened. I don't know. But that right there is literally the only thing I didn't like about this series. So let's just get rolling right here. So that's the setup to the beginning of 5 Days of Sith. Now, the person whose eyes that we view this story through is an individual called Nanda. So this is Ensign Nanda. She's Darth Vader's assistant and she accompanies Vader on a personal mission without Emperor Palpatine's consent. Right, so I thought that was interesting right away, right? Oh, this is going to be very interesting, right? And right from the beginning of her narration, she talks about how this was the most terrifying 5 days that she's ever lived in her life, right? And things of that nature. And just knowing that Vader is on this mission of personal revenge against this Colonel Bircher or just anybody that had any kind of contributions to him infiltrating the Empire. It's just interesting in that he's doing it without the consent of Palpatine, right? So he's at odds with Palpatine. He's mad at Palpatine. Vader is mad at Palpatine because he demoted him. He punished him. He put this rebel spy in command of his ship. And so he's just like, look, I'm not even trying to talk to Palpatine. And Palpatine is just kind of hurling insults at him, calling him a lapdog, a stray pup, things like that. But Vader is not fazed by any of that. He wants revenge. So Nanda and Vader go to Coruscant, and right away, Vader starts torturing Imperial officers, right? And Nanda is just kind of like shocked. But she doesn't show her shock. She shares her terror with the reader, right? But when you see her in these panels and you see her in the story, she's composed. So Vader, the reason why he's torturing these Imperial officers is because he is trying to find out the slicers, the data slicers that contributed to the creation of Bircher's identity within the Imperial ranks, right? So ultimately, what ends up happening after Vader gets the information that he wants, he goes to the planet Bothaway, which is where the Bothans are from, right? And he goes there to deal with the slicers. Now, Vader ultimately ends up again on the Devastator, his former command ship. And Vader is there on the ship in order to address the command staff under Bircher. And Vader is furious Once again, Vader is intimidating, he's torturing, and he basically says to the entire crew that they are all to blame, right? He says, since I can't pinpoint one of you, I'm going to blame all of you. And one officer even points out that there's like tens of thousands of basically Imperial members of the Empire that have to pilot the ship or aid in the ship's flight, right? And Vader just does not care. He says something like, all 20,000 played a hand in Butcher's infiltration of the Empire inside the Imperial ranks. They are all to blame, right? And then we have one of the most shocking scenes that I've ever seen in any Star Wars medium. I mean, I was really like taken aback by this. So one officer basically stands up to Darth Vader, right? He stands up to him and he starts basically saying like, you were the one that assigned command to Butcher in the first place. You were the one to oversee the transition, and basically just being like, who are you? You are not the Emperor. You're nothing compared to Tarkin, something like that. And he just went off on him. And, you know, he was actually making some valid points. You know, if you actually look at the larger context of the situation. But at the same time, you know that there's going to be some serious repercussions, lethal repercussions for standing up to Vader, right? But this is where the twist comes in. Instead of Vader doing something like force choking him or snapping his neck using the Force or pulling out his lightsaber and impaling him, what happens is that another Imperial officer in the room shoots the guy that stood up to Vader, the other Imperial officer that stood up to Vader, and then he turns the blaster on himself and commits suicide. But before he commits suicide, he says, "Forgive us, Lord Vader." And I was like, whoa, oh man. I was like, now this is some brutal stuff. And I thought it was such a chilling and terrifying way to convey to the reader just how horrific and terrifying Darth Vader is. It's like this guy that shot the other officer that was standing up to Vader basically just knew, like, there's absolutely nothing that we can do to talk our way out of this. The only way out of here is suicide. And him killing the other officer just conveyed to me that he really, really was strong in his convictions as far as basically believing in what the Empire is about, right? Like, we failed you, Lord Vader. And then he kills himself after he kills the other officer. See, it would have been different if he had just killed himself out of fear or something, but he killed the other guy first. Like how dare you? It's like almost like treating Darth Vader like he's a deity, like they do to the leader of North Korea, or like the Nazis did to Hitler. I mean, that was really, really brutal scene that's in this comic book, 5 Days of Sith, man. And another thing that I have to mention is that it's also right here in this scene where Vader basically just says that he doesn't care where Bira Saya is, right? So she's her whereabouts are briefly mentioned, and he's just basically like, she is completely irrelevant to me and I could care less about her, right? And I thought that was kind of weird. I was like, really? I mean, she failed you. I mean, I know he has bigger fish to fry, but again, just like I stated in the introduction, why bring her up? If she's not important, why bring her up? Right? I mean, I don't know. It just feels like it kind of contradicts Vader's sentiments in the prior issue where he was like, look, if you fail me, you're going to regret it. Right? And I understand he has bigger fish to fry, but I'm just kind of like, why are we bringing this up if she's not going to appear in the comic? In other words, right? So, whatever. Moving on. we have an awesome scene. Another great scene. Another great reason why I love this story, 5 Days of Sith. So, Obi-Wan, his ghost, begins to haunt Vader, right? And I love it. So Vader is just kind of sitting there meditating, looking out into space, and he can hear Obi-Wan Kenobi, right, haunting him. And I love the fact that it's right here where Obi-Wan Kenobi tells Vader that there's another. Because Vader's like, kind of like, shut up. I killed you. You're nothing. You're weak. You're pathetic. You're nothing. I killed you. And Obi-Wan is like, but look at me. I'm here speaking to you. I'm more powerful than you can imagine, Anakin. And then when Obi-Wan says his true name, Anakin, Vader gets furious. Like, Anakin is dead. Don't ever say that name. Anakin Skywalker is dead. And then that's when Obi-Wan Kenobi says, there is another. And then he kind of just disappears for the moment, right? And this infers that this is how Darth Vader was able to learn that Luke was a Skywalker, or able to make the connection, right? If he had any doubts that Luke was his son or the son of Anakin Skywalker, everything's are beginning to be clarified over here. And I love that. I love this sequence. I thought it was awesome, right? And even Vader says, you died for that boy. Who is he? Right? I thought that was awesome because I'm like, you know what? This is stuff that I never really thought about, or that we've never seen addressed in a Star Wars medium, right? Like, what was Vader thinking when Obi-Wan made that sacrifice for that young boy that he didn't know? Right? What was he thinking in that moment, or the next day, or the next months? Like, why did Obi-Wan Kenobi sacrifice himself for that boy? Well, we're seeing him make the connections. We're seeing him make the conclusions and deliberate on all this stuff. And I love it. I think it's fascinating, and I think it contributes excellently to the lore. So after this, Darth Vader goes to the Alderaan ruins, the ruins of Alderaan, right? And the reason why he goes there is because he's informed of the whereabouts of Tag Rogarin. Who is Tag Rogarin? Well, Tag Rogarin, he's basically this character that popped up in Volume 2 of this series, and he's a former Imperial that was one of the engineers on the Death Star, and he is from Alderaan, I think, if I remember correctly. But either way, he's either a deserter or he's gone AWOL or something like that. And he's no longer part of the Empire. And he deeply regrets contributing to the Death Star's construction. And he deeply regrets destroying the planet of Alderaan. In fact, he basically took over like a deserted Star Destroyer or something like that, and he's using it to collect artifacts and ruins of Alderaan. And he was able to have an encounter with Princess Leia, who actually went to the ruins of Alderaan and found him there, and they had a discussion, and she went there in an X-Wing, right? And this plays an important part in the story right here. And basically, she met this guy, and once she found out that he was an Imperial and that he contributed to the destruction of the first Death Star, she was like, screw this guy. And she had to leave for other reasons, right? She had a mission, but she told him, like, mark my words, I'm going to come and get you again, and you are going to go to trial for war crimes, right? Well, that obviously doesn't happen because Darth Vader gets to Tag Rogarin first, right? And the reason why Vader was even made aware of this character is because Tag Rogarin is now wanted by the Empire for being on pro-Alliance networks. So I guess some of the Rebel Alliance networks started discussing him, and that's how he popped up on the Empire's radar, right? So what happens is that stormtroopers bring Vader, Tag, and Vader wants to interrogate him himself, right? And here we have another display of Darth Vader's epic brutality and ruthlessness. So the stormtroopers say no to Vader in regards to allowing him to interrogate Tag by himself. They say that it's against protocol, that he must be taken to Coruscant, right? Vader just like brutally slaughters them for defying him, right? And again, we have this character, Ensign Nanda, seeing all this slaughter through her own eyes. She's like, oh my God, this guy, Vader, is willing to kill his own men. Like, just at the slightest sign of defiance, right? And she just like is shocked. She's terrified, but she just sits there on the outside looking composed, right? But she shares her thoughts with the readers, and that's why I love this story, man. This was epic, right? I really loved it. It was short but sweet, but I really love this story. So after Darth Vader slaughters the stormtroopers for defying him, it must be noted that this leaves Nanda as literally the only witness alive to this whole debacle, to this whole rampage that Darth Vader is on. There is no other Imperial officers anywhere on this ship, right? Now, Tag refuses to say who he met with, right? Which was Princess Leia. But Vader reads his mind and learns that it's Princess Leia right before he snaps his neck using the Force. Now, after this, Darth Vader and Nanda go to the planet Chandrila, right? Which is the home planet of Bircher. And this is where it's confirmed that Bircher is part of the Mothma family, because we see the Mothma family graves, right? We see 3 graves that belong to members of the Mothma family. And Nanda goes to investigate this, I guess you want to say the homestead or the home of Bircher, by herself, right? So Vader sends her out there. She's the only one left. And mind you, since Nanda is the only Imperial officer left on this mission besides Vader, she's terrified about this. She's having thoughts of like, look, is he gonna kill me because I've been a witness to all this slaughter? Is he gonna allow me to live? Is he gonna kill me? You know, so it's pretty terrifying, right? And suspenseful. That's it. That's why I like this story, because it is suspenseful. So basically, what Vader decides to do as soon as Nanda confirms that Bircher was part of the Mothma family, that Mon Mothma was his aunt, he's like, okay, thanks for clarifying. Initiate annihilation of this entire homestead. And then he just like shoots this like epic laser that just almost like annihilates Nanda in the process, right? Just this huge explosion, and she's just like right there, and like the flames like are like barely engulf her by like inches, and she's just terrified, right? She's like, oh my God, Vader's gonna kill me, you know, but he doesn't. He's just a ruthless asshole. You know what I'm saying? And I'm pretty sure he also wanted to terrify her too, right? But Vader lives up to his promise, because at the beginning of the story, he tells Ensign Nanda, he says, you come on this mission with me and it's successful, you're going to be promoted very high up in the ranks. You'll be 5 years ahead of your peers, right? And that's what he does, right? So he promotes Nanda. And then right here, this is where we get this little footnote that this Bira Say character was killed on some backwater planet for some unknown reasons, which I thought was kind of a letdown. But overall, the rest of this story is just awesome, right? But it has to be noted that Nanda, she got promoted as promised by Vader, but the last shot or the last panel or the last page of this comic is worth 1,000 words, and I love it. You just see her like kind of like on the floor, terrified, like that Vader is just gonna pop up any minute and get her, right? And that's how this story ends, man. And it just goes without saying, I loved it, man. I thought it was an A+. This was epic, and I highly recommend it if you love Darth Vader, if you love stuff like seeing the Purge, seeing him go hunting. You got to get this comic. You got to read it. It was outstanding, and I loved it. Thank you guys for listening to this review and in-depth analysis of 5 Days of Sith. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and share. May the Force be with you. And last but not least, one love, people. Take care.